The town looked quiet from the outside, but as a viewer, I could feel there was something different about it. It wasn't busy, it wasn't loud, and it didn't pretend to be anything special. It was just a small place tucked between wide fields and long roads, where everyone knew what everyone else was doing. People waved at each other from their porches. Kids rode their bikes on dusty paths. Life moved slowly, almost like it had its own rhythm. And then there was Tom, the rancher everyone recognized from a distance. He wasn't the type to talk much. He wasn't the type to join town gatherings either. Tom kept to himself. He had that rough, weathered look that comes from years of sun and wind, and a stubborn way of walking that told you he didn't bend easily. Most days, he worked his land alone, pushing through tasks with quiet determination. Even though the town felt peaceful, I could sense something building under the surface. People whispered a bit more than usual. They looked toward Tom's ranch when they passed by, wondering what he was up to. It wasn't like him to cause trouble, but it wasn't like him to follow the crowd either. Watching this small town move through its simple routines made me feel like I was there, standing on that long dirt road, hearing the wind roll across open fields. Everything seemed normal, almost too normal. It's the kind of calm that makes you think something is about to shift, even if you don't know what yet. People in that town didn't like raising their voices. They didn't shout across the streets or argue loudly on corners. Instead, when something bothered them, they talked in low tones. They leaned closer. They chose their words carefully. And lately, every quiet conversation circled back to one thing: the rancher. It started with small comments. Someone would say they saw Tom buying strange supplies. Someone else heard late-night noises from his land. Another person claimed he was digging in an area he never touched before. Nothing solid, just bits and pieces. But in a town that had nothing new to talk about most days, even a small rumor could spread faster than a storm wind. As I imagine myself standing there, listening to these whispers, it feels like the town itself is holding its breath. People don't want to assume the worst about Tom. He's lived there longer than most of them. But something about his behavior makes them uneasy. It's not what he's doing that scares them. It's the part they can't figure out. The warnings began in a gentle way at first. Old Mr. Harper, who lived near the ranch, walked up to Tom one morning and asked what he was working on. Tom simply said, "Just a project." Then he turned away, not offering a single detail more. That wasn't enough for someone like Harper, who loved knowing everything. So he tried again. "Don't take risks you don't need," he said. But Tom didn't reply, he just kept walking. When Harper returned to town, he told everyone what happened, and that simple exchange was enough to fuel new concern. Tom wasn't just busy, he was secretive. And being secretive in a small town was almost an invitation for rumors to grow wild. Soon Mrs. Dalton from the bakery chimed in. She said she saw Tom carrying equipment she didn't recognize. "Heavy stuff," she whispered. "Things he's never needed for ranching." Her eyes widened as she spoke, and each person listening leaned a little closer. Even the customers waiting for their bread forgot the line for a moment. Then there was the sound people heard at night, a low, steady noise echoing across the fields. Nobody could describe it clearly. It wasn't like an animal, and it wasn't like machinery either. But it went on for hours, long after everyone else was asleep. People stood by their windows, staring toward the ranch, trying to spot a light or movement. They saw nothing, only darkness stretching over the land, but the sound kept going. In a place where nothing ever changed, these little things stacked up in people's minds. The talk grew louder, even if the voices stayed low. More people started warning Tom. Some drove out to the ranch just to speak to him. They said things like, "Please, Tom, don't do that," even though they didn't truly know what that was. They only knew it frightened them. One afternoon, a group of townsfolk gathered outside the general store, and the mood felt heavier than usual. I can picture myself standing there, watching them argue softly among themselves. A few wanted to leave Tom alone, insisting he had the right to do what he wanted on his land. Others said this was different, that whatever he was planning could put the whole town at risk. No one had proof, but fear doesn't need proof. It only needs imagination. The sheriff eventually stepped in, though not officially. He drove out to Tom's ranch to make sure everything was safe. He returned with a confused expression and told the town that Tom wasn't breaking any laws. "He's stubborn, not dangerous," the sheriff said, but even he admitted that something felt off, something he couldn't explain. Every time someone tried to talk to Tom, the story played out the same way. He listened quietly, nodded once, and then went right back to work. He didn't get angry. He didn't argue. He just behaved like their warnings were nothing more than a light breeze brushing past him, and that only made the tension worse. People wondered if Tom knew something they didn't. Maybe he found something buried on his land. Maybe he uncovered an old family secret. Maybe he was desperate. Maybe he was angry. The theories were endless, and the more theories people made up, the more real they began to feel. The phrase, "please, don't do that," became something everyone repeated, even if they weren't talking directly to him. It felt like the entire town was trying to stop something invisible, something they could only sense but not describe. At night, the conversations grew more intense. Families sat at dinner tables, whispering about Tom. Neighbors stood outside after sunset, sharing the latest thing they heard. Some people said they felt vibrations under the ground. Others claimed they saw a flicker of light deep on the ranch, though nobody could be sure if it was real or just their imagination. The fear wasn't just about Tom's actions. It was about the unknown. Humans can handle danger when they understand it, but when the danger hides behind silence and mystery, it grows larger in their minds. Every unanswered question turns into a possible threat. I imagine myself walking down that quiet street, hearing bits of conversations from open windows. The town that once felt peaceful is now unsettled. People check their locks more often. They double-check their barns and sheds at night. Even the animals seem restless, as if they can sense the tension in the air. And through all this, Tom moves like a man with a purpose. A man fully convinced that whatever he's doing is necessary. His determined steps, his long hours, his refusal to explain, everything about him only deepens the worry around him. Yet not one person has seen the full picture. Not one person knows what Tom is really planning. They only know he's going through with it. And every time someone tries to stop him, he says nothing. He doesn't argue. He just keeps pushing forward. Watching this buildup feels like standing at the edge of something about to break. The fear, the whispers, the warnings, it all creates a pressure that keeps tightening. And you can tell just by the way people act that soon something will happen. Something they're not ready for. Something they tried so hard to prevent. But Tom has already made up his mind. Tom's ranch sat on the far edge of town, where the land opened wide and the sky felt larger. Most people only saw the outside of it, the fences, the worn barn, the cattle grazing in slow, lazy circles. But the real mystery wasn't in the fields or the buildings. It was in Tom himself. And the more I picture him out there alone, the more I feel like something deeper is happening inside him, something the town has never seen. Tom wasn't the kind of man who showed emotions openly. He didn't laugh loud, didn't complain, didn't let people see him angry. He lived with a quiet sort of strength, like someone who had learned to carry heavy things without talking about them. The town respected that about him, even admired it. But it also meant no one really knew what he felt. His silence created a space where rumors grew easily, like weeds in dry soil. If someone drove past the ranch at sunset, they'd see him standing outside, staring into the fields as if he was waiting for something. He usually stayed still for a long time, hands on his hips, eyes fixed on the same spot. As a viewer, I can almost imagine what that must have looked like. One man alone, the fading light behind him, thinking thoughts he never shared. People noticed he started working differently. He wasn't following his usual routine. He stayed out later, rising earlier. He avoided the town more than before. He didn't come in for supplies unless he had to. And when he did, he spoke less than usual, giving short answers, avoiding small talk. It wasn't rudeness. It was focus. A kind of focus that makes everyone around him uncomfortable because they know it comes from something serious. Some people believed Tom was hiding a physical problem. Maybe he was sick, or maybe something on his land put him in danger. Others whispered he might be dealing with grief. He had lost someone years back, though folks didn't mention it openly. The pain of it had faded from conversations, but maybe it never faded for him. A few thought this project was tied to that old loss, a way for Tom to face something he had avoided for too long. There were nights when neighbors swore they saw him out in the fields, long after midnight, walking with a lantern in his hand. The light moved slowly across the land, bobbing with each of his steps. What he was looking for, or what he was checking, nobody knew. But more than one person said the sight gave them chills. Something about a lone figure in the dark, working without pause, felt unsettling. It wasn't just the late nights. Tom began locking areas of his ranch that were always open before. He put up new signs telling people to stay out. He added heavy chains to the back gates. These were things he had never done. The ranch used to feel welcoming, even if Tom wasn't. But now it felt closed off, protected, almost like he didn't want anyone to see what he was doing or what might be happening there. And still, he refused to explain anything. There was a moment some people talked about for days. It happened at the town feed store. Tom walked in to buy supplies, and Mrs. Dalton followed him inside. She wasn't trying to bother him, she just wanted to understand. She placed a gentle hand on his arm and said, "Tom, please, don't do that thing you're planning. We're worried." She wasn't accusing him. She wasn't demanding answers. She was simply trying to reach him. Tom froze for a moment. He didn't look at her, didn't pull away. He just stood still, like her words hit a part of him he didn't want touched. Then he whispered, almost too softly to hear, "I have to." After that, he turned around and walked out the door, leaving the supplies behind. People retold that moment over and over. The words "I have to" stuck with them, becoming heavier every time they repeated them. What did he mean? What was forcing him to do something the entire town begged him to avoid? I can imagine myself watching all this unfold, feeling the same curiosity and worry as the townsfolk. There's something haunting in the way Tom acts, not reckless, not foolish, but driven by a purpose he cannot share. It's the kind of behavior that comes from a deep place inside a person, a place shaped by memories, fears, or promises. Some said Tom found something strange buried on his land. Others claimed he received a letter that changed everything. A few believed he saw something one night, something that scared him or pushed him into action. The theories never stopped because Tom never confirmed or denied anything. His silence allowed the mystery to grow, and people's imaginations filled in the gaps. Kids riding their bikes whispered that Tom was digging up something dangerous. Farmers passing by believed he was preparing for a disaster. Older folks shook their heads and said he was chasing ghosts from his past. No one agreed on a single explanation, but everyone agreed on one thing. Whatever Tom was hiding, it wasn't small. If you stood at the edge of his ranch, you could feel it in the air. A kind of tension that traveled across the land like an invisible wire pulled too tight. Every sound seemed sharper. Every shadow felt important. It was the kind of environment where secrets thrive. Even the animals sensed the shift. Horses were restless. Dogs barked more often. Cattle moved nervously, stamping the ground as if something beneath it disturbed them. People noticed and their fears grew. And through it all, Tom kept going. Step after step, task after task, driven by something personal and powerful. Something the town could feel but couldn't name. To watch a man so determined, so quiet, and so alone, it creates a pull, like you're being drawn into his world whether you want to be or not. His actions don't look random. They look planned, thought out, heavy with meaning. And that mystery keeps everyone watching, waiting, trying to guess what he will do next. Whatever Tom was hiding, it was becoming clear it wasn't just a project. It was something that lived inside him, something that shaped every choice he made. and he wasn't going to stop. No matter who begged him, no matter who warned him, no matter what the town feared was coming. The morning it happened didn't look any different from the others. The sun rose over the fields in its usual slow way, casting a pale orange glow across the town. People unlocked their shops, swept their porches, drank their first coffee of the day. Everything seemed normal at first glance, but beneath that calm surface, there was a feeling that today wasn't like the others. Something was off. Something was coming. I imagined myself standing on that dusty road, watching the early light stretch across the rooftops. The air felt still, almost heavy. Even the birds weren't singing the same way they usually did. It was the kind of morning where the world holds its breath without explaining why. Then someone noticed smoke rising far off in the distance, thin, gray, almost ghost-like. It drifted up from Tom's ranch. Not the thick smoke of a fire, but the steady kind that comes from machinery or something working hard. People stopped what they were doing, staring toward that direction with confusion. Smoke wasn't unusual in ranch towns, but everyone knew Tom didn't use machines like that. Not anymore. Not after what happened years ago. A few folks stepped out into the street, shading their eyes. They watched the smoke line rise higher. And then the sound came, low, rumbling, uneven. The same sound some people claimed they heard weeks earlier, only louder now, stronger, more real. It carried across the fields like a warning, rattling windows, shaking nerves. That was the moment everyone understood. Whatever Tom had been planning, whatever he had been hiding, today was the day he was finally doing it. Some people ran to grab their trucks. Others walked, almost in a daze. I picture myself joining that crowd, pulled toward the ranch not because I wanted trouble, but because curiosity and worry worked together like magnets. People needed to know. They needed to see with their own eyes what Tom had refused to talk about. The closer the town came to the ranch, the more intense everything felt. The ground seemed to tremble, not violently, but enough to make you aware of it under your feet. Dust lifted into the air. The sound grew louder, echoing across the open space like it was coming from deep underground. People called out Tom's name as they approached. No answer. When they reached the outer fence, they saw the gate wide open. Tom never left it open, not once in his life. That detail alone made everyone stop for a moment before stepping through. As they walked deeper onto the ranch, they spotted him. Tom stood in the middle of a cleared patch of land he had been working on for weeks. His back was turned, his posture stiff, his breathing heavy. He was surrounded by equipment, strange metal structures, ropes, tools, things no one recognized, things that didn't belong on a simple cattle ranch. The machine at the center of it all shook and rattled, creating that awful sound. Smoke drifted up from its base in slow waves. It looked homemade, welded together from parts pulled from who knows where. Tom had built this himself, piece by piece, quietly, secretly. Someone shouted, "Tom, stop." Another yelled, "Please don't do that." But Tom didn't turn around. He didn't move at all. Instead, he reached out and pulled a lever. The machine roared, so loud the ground seemed to jerk beneath everyone's feet. Birds exploded from nearby trees. Animals in the fields bolted in every direction. People stumbled back, covering their ears. Something beneath the machine started shifting. The dirt shook. Cracks formed in the ground, spreading outward like veins. A deep groan echoed from below, a sound so unnatural it made everyone's stomach tighten. The earth itself felt alive. A gust of wind shot upward, lifting dust into a twisting spiral. The machine rattled harder and harder, fighting against the force beneath it. The whole scene felt unreal, like the ranch had suddenly become something different, something dangerous, something ancient. Tom stood his ground. He kept his hand on the lever, gripping it so tightly his knuckles turned white. His jaw was clenched. Sweat ran down his face. But he didn't let go, not even when the machine shook so violently it looked like it could tear apart at any second. Someone ran forward, trying to reach him, but the ground cracked again, forcing them to stop. The noise became almost unbearable. The wind whipped around the clearing, throwing dirt and grass into the air. People covered their faces, barely able to see what was happening through the storm of dust. Then the sound changed. It wasn't a rumble anymore. It wasn't the grinding of metal or the groan of shifting earth. It became something sharper, like a deep, echoing snap from far below the surface. A sound that didn't belong to machines or nature. A sound that felt like it came from something waking up. Tom stumbled backward as the machine jerked violently. One of the metal rods snapped and shot into the air. Sparks flew. Smoke burst out in a thick cloud. The whole structure tilted, then slammed into the ground with a crash that echoed across the ranch. The earth stopped shaking. The wind died instantly. Silence fell, heavy, ringing, almost unreal. Everyone stared at Tom. His chest heaved as he tried to catch his breath, his hands trembling. The ground around him was cracked open in jagged lines, some deep enough that no one could see the bottom. The air smelled like burnt metal and dust. People didn't move. They didn't speak. They just watched him, waiting for some explanation. But Tom only stared at the broken machine with an expression no one could read. Whatever he had done, whatever he was trying to reveal or stop or control, it had just been unleashed in front of the entire town. And nobody knew what came next. For a long moment after the machine collapsed, no one moved. People just stood there, frozen by the shock of what they saw. Dust hung in the air like a thin fog, drifting slowly over the cracked earth. Tom still hadn't spoken, but something about the way he stood, shoulders slumped, hands shaking, made it clear that whatever happened wasn't an accident. He knew exactly what he was trying to do, and he knew exactly what it meant. People approached him cautiously, as if stepping too close might set off another tremor. The ground felt strange beneath their feet, loose, unsettled, like it was still thinking about shifting again. A few whispered that they should call for help. Others whispered that help might not even know what to do. Then Tom finally lifted his head. His face was pale, almost gray. His eyes looked tired in a way that made him seem older than he was. He stared at the cracks beneath him, not at the crowd. It was as if the thing he had been fighting for weeks had finally shown itself, and now he had nothing left to hide behind. Someone asked him what the machine was. Another asked what he was trying to dig up. No one sounded angry anymore. They just sounded scared, curious, confused, and Tom had to know the truth was coming out whether he liked it or not. He knelt down slowly, brushing away the loose dirt near the largest crack. When he spoke, his voice was rough, almost broken. He didn't shout or try to defend himself. He just told them why he had been working day and night, why he ignored everyone's warnings, why he risked angering the entire town. It all began years ago. Tom explained that long before the town grew into what it was, his father told him stories about the land, strange stories the town always dismissed as superstition. Stories about old tunnels running deep beneath the ranch. Stories about something buried there long before any farm or fence existed. Something that wasn't supposed to be disturbed. Something his father once warned him never to dig near. Tom didn't listen back then either. He said that a few months ago one of his cattle disappeared. Not wandered off, disappeared. He searched everywhere. No signs of coyotes, no tracks, nothing. Then, a week later, he found another one gone. Same pattern, no struggle, no clues. Just missing. That's when he remembered the stories. He started checking the ground. He paid attention to the way the soil felt softer in certain areas. He felt faint vibrations during quiet nights, subtle but real. He dug small test holes and found pockets of air where there shouldn't be any. The land felt hollow, unstable. Like something underneath was slowly collapsing or shifting. Tom tried to warn the town, he said. But after years of keeping to himself, he didn't know how to explain it without sounding delusional. And the more he tried, the more people dismissed him. They thought he was stressed, grieving old memories. So he stopped talking and started working. He built the machine because he needed proof. Proof that the tunnels were real. Proof that something was moving down there. Proof that whatever was hiding beneath the ranch was the cause of the disappearances. He didn't know what he would find, but he believed he had to reveal it before the land gave way on its own, before it took more than cattle. People listened in stunned silence. Some believed him, some didn't. But everyone felt the weight of his words because they all felt that quake. They all saw the cracks. They all heard the unnatural sound that came from below. Tom reached into the crack again and brushed away more dirt until the edge of something appeared, something smooth and dark. It wasn't stone, it wasn't wood. It looked manufactured but old, very old, too old to belong to anyone currently living in the town. People leaned closer, squinting, unsure what they were seeing. The object had clean lines and a texture that didn't match the surrounding soil. It was buried deep, deeper than anyone would have expected. Maybe it had been there for generations, maybe longer. Tom said he had found small pieces of this strange material weeks ago while digging. He tried to show a few people, but they thought he was making it up. So he hid the evidence, determined to uncover the rest of it himself. He didn't want panic. He didn't want rumors. He just wanted the truth. But now the truth was right in front of everyone. Some people whispered that the object looked like part of a structure. Others said it looked like a container. A few suggested it might be something left behind by people who lived in the area centuries ago, long before the town existed. But none of the guesses felt right. None of the guesses matched the cold, metallic surface staring up through the broken earth. The sheriff stepped forward, looking more unsettled than anyone had ever seen him. He crouched next to Tom and gently tapped the object. It made a hollow sound, sharp, clean, unnatural. The kind of sound that didn't belong in soil. Whatever it was, it had been resting under the ranch for longer than anyone could track. Maybe it was dangerous. Maybe it wasn't. But Tom was sure of one thing: it was moving recently. Something about it had awakened. As Tom talked, the crowd grew more and more uneasy. Not because they feared the object, but because they realized Tom had been trying to protect them in his own stubborn, secretive way. He wasn't acting out of pride. He was acting out of responsibility. He was trying to get ahead of whatever was happening underground before it reached the houses, the school, the streets. Tom looked at the cracked earth again, his eyes filled with worry he could no longer hide. He said he didn't know what the next step should be. He didn't know if uncovering the object would make things worse or better. He only knew that pretending it wasn't there would be the real danger. All around him, people exchanged glances, nervous, shaky, filled with the weight of a truth they didn't want but couldn't ignore. Whatever lived beneath that ranch had finally come to the surface, and now the whole town had to face it together. The crowd didn't leave right away. People stayed gathered around the broken machine, staring at the cracks like they were windows into another world. The air felt different now, thicker, heavier, charged with questions no one wanted to say out loud. It was as if the entire ranch had shifted into something unfamiliar the moment that strange object was exposed. And even though the dust had settled, the tension hadn't. Tom sat on the ground beside the crack, his hands resting loosely on his knees. He looked exhausted in a way no amount of sleep could fix. When people approached him, they did so slowly, like he was holding something fragile that might break if they moved too fast. But Tom didn't push anyone away. He just watched them all with tired eyes, as if waiting for them to decide what came next. Some folks whispered about leaving, packing up their families and getting as far from the ranch as possible. Others whispered about calling experts from the city, people who studied strange things buried underground. But many didn't want outsiders involved. This was their town, their land, their problem. They didn't want strangers turning it into a spectacle. I imagined myself standing among them, feeling the weight of that choice. There's something unsettling about having old secrets rise from the ground beneath your feet. Something that makes you feel small, like the land you thought you knew suddenly has layers you never understood. A group of men stepped closer to the crack, peering into the shadows where the dark surface rested. They tried to uncover more of it with their hands, brushing away loose soil. The smooth material extended deeper, curving slightly, almost like the edge of a dome. but the crack wasn't wide enough to reveal its full shape. Every time someone tried to widen it, the earth trembled just enough to warn them to stop. Tom finally spoke again. His voice was steadier now, but still heavy. He told them he had felt those tremors for months, subtle at first, then stronger as he dug closer to the hidden object. He said the land had been weakening on its own, as if something below was shifting upward. And he believed that if he hadn't interfered, the ground might have collapsed beneath someone unexpectedly. Maybe a child, maybe a farmer, maybe an entire pasture. Hearing him say that made several people step back, suddenly aware of how close they were standing to something unknown. The sheriff asked Tom if he thought the object was dangerous. Tom didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared at it for a long time before saying, "Dangerous isn't the right word, but it isn't meant to be touched." That sent a nervous ripple through the crowd. People exchanged looks, unsure what to make of his words. Not meant to be touched. Was it sacred? Was it cursed? Was it something his father had discovered long before him? Before anyone could ask more, a strange sound rose from the crack, not as loud as before, but unmistakable. A faint hum, almost like the vibration of a distant engine. It wasn't coming from the machine. It wasn't the wind. It was coming from the object itself. People froze, eyes widening as they leaned in closer, trying to understand what they were hearing. The hum grew stronger for a moment, then faded again, slipping back into silence. It was enough to make the hair on everyone's arms stand on end. Enough to make people look instinctively toward the sky, the ground, the trees, anywhere for an explanation. Tom didn't look surprised. That might have been the most unsettling part of all. He had heard it before. He had known something was alive down there, not alive like a creature, but alive in a different way. Awake, waiting. A few brave souls suggested digging more, widening the crack, exposing the entire object. But others refused. They said the land was unstable enough already. They didn't want another tremor. They didn't want the object responding again. They didn't want to provoke something they didn't understand. And Tom didn't encourage them either. He just kept watching the ground, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Little by little, people drifted away from the crack, forming small groups across the clearing. They spoke quietly, worried that raising their voices might disturb the earth again. Some wondered aloud how long the object had been buried. Others wondered if their grandparents had known anything about it. A few blamed Tom for waking it up, even though they didn't say it loudly. Fear makes people look for someone to point at. Yet at the same time, there were voices defending him. People who said he did the only thing he could after realizing something was wrong. People who admitted that if he hadn't dug, they would still be living their lives unaware of the danger beneath them. Tom heard these conversations, but he didn't respond. He sat still, letting the town work through its fear and confusion on its own. As the sun moved higher, the light cast long shadows across the cracked ground. The dark surface below glimmered faintly, reflecting slivers of sunlight in a way that looked almost unnatural. A few children clung to their parents' hands, staring at it with wide eyes, sensing the seriousness even if they didn't understand the meaning. Eventually, someone placed a temporary barrier around the crack, just rope and wooden posts, something to keep people from getting too close. It wasn't much, but it made the town feel slightly safer, slightly more in control. Tom watched them work. He didn't object. He didn't help. He simply observed with a distant look, as if he wasn't fully present in the moment. As if part of his mind was still underground, reaching into the silence where the object rested. The sheriff told Tom they would return later, with more people and better equipment. He said they needed to study the object before making any decisions. The town needed time to think. Tom nodded slowly, but his eyes didn't leave the crack. Even as people walked back toward the road, their steps cautious and uneven, no one felt like the danger was over. It didn't matter how far away they got. It didn't matter how many times they looked back. The unease followed them, whispering that the ground beneath their town held secrets far older and far heavier than they ever imagined. And now that the surface had been broken, those secrets were beginning to breathe.